Hello, and welcome to our panel discussion about the business of open caching. So what are we going to talk about today? We'll be looking at several things, namely, what is open caching in the first place? What is it all about? What is fueling market interest and hence its adoption? What are the key business drivers? And that both from an OTT operator perspective as well as for ISPs. And we'll also look at how can you get started with all of that. My name is Andy Waltenspiel, and I'm excited to be your host and moderator of this panel today. In my day job, I'm advising and challenging thought leaders and innovators of our industry to connect the dots, to think beyond the obvious, and to go the extra mile. Now, today, let me introduce you to our panelists. So, who do we have here? We have Jason Thibeault from the Streaming Video Alliance, called JT. Hi, JT. Morning. We got James Brickmeier, called Jim, from Velocix. Hello. And we got Eric Klein from Disney Streaming, called Eric. Hey there. Hi, gentlemen. Great to have you here today.
All right, thanks.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. So before we jump in, please, I ask every one of you, please introduce yourself, your company, and also your role at the Streaming Video Alliance, because that is a central piece of open caching. And maybe, Eric, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll kick it off. So I am Executive Director of Media Distribution Technology at Disney Streaming Service for my day job. But my area that I've been involved in for the last 5+ years has been leading open caching initiatives as part of the Streaming Video Alliance. I was first a working group chair for open caching, developing specifications and guiding them through the technical process. And now I'm a technical advocate out here talking about it, understanding things, talking to different ISPs, different technology providers, understanding ways within the marketplace that we can help evangelize and move open caching forward, because from a content provider standpoint, there's quite a lot of value in it for our distribution needs.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks, Eric. And JT.
I'm JT, so I'm the Executive Director of the Streaming Video Alliance. Day job is I help guide the organization. I evangelize all the technologies and all the solutions that our working groups are engaged with. I work with folks like Eric across our different activity groups, so things that are around open caching or networking and transport, so a lot of protocol stuff, VR, live streaming. We have lots of working groups engaged on lots of different projects. And the output, of course, is helping get those documents published by our members and ratified by our membership, and then out to the industry so that solutions like open caching can be built from the specifications that the groups have developed.
Great. And last but not least, Jim.
I'm Jim Brickmeier. I'm Chief Product and Marketing Officer at Velocix. So I'm responsible for Velocix's strategy as well as the product evolution, including the hybrid cloud CDN and open caching solutions. And we are also part of the SVA. And so we work closely with JT and Eric on a variety of things.
Right. So another abbreviation, Streaming Video Alliance, of course, is the SVA.
Right.
Thanks, gentlemen. So let's jump in and give an introduction on open caching. So maybe we start with you, JT. So what is the background of open caching? Where did it come from? Who is participating? Give us an overview, please.
Yeah, so the SVA was founded in 2014. There were 14 member companies at the time coming together. And although there was still generally a broad idea around what the SVA was going to do, open caching was at the heart of it. And the idea that those companies had, which has been carried forth over the past 5 or 6 years, was to create an interoperable way for caches to deliver content in a fragmented delivery architecture, right? So content owners and platform operators were starting to use multiple CDNs. They had their own CDNs, they had origins, and they wanted to be able to manage all of those caches from a single point, right? So it's very difficult to chase down content issues across multiple delivery networks when you have to manage them through different interfaces. And so open caching was really a way to address that challenge and address that situation. And at the same time, for network operators, those network operators who were part of the original group were very interested in how to create a more efficient delivery for their viewers. So obviously they're an ISP, they have subscribers. They're having to backhaul a lot of content across their network because CDNs were terminating, at peering locations. And so they felt that having a caching solution within their network, which could serve the needs of multiple content operators, not just one. So not somebody like a Netflix box that's just for Netflix content, but a caching box that's for all content, could really help them improve the delivery of content to their viewers when they're requesting streaming video. So that was really the genesis of it. Interoperable caches, better management, improved delivery for the network operator.
Okay, and can you mention a few names that are public that are participating in the SVA?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, obviously, you can visit our website and you can go to the Open Caching Working Group and see all the companies, or you can go to our microsite, which is opencaching.streamingvideoalliance.org. That has a lot of in-depth information, not only on open caching, but all of the companies. So obviously, Disney, Velocix, both of them are involved in the project. We've got, Lumen, Verizon, Comcast, Limelight, lots of CDNs, lots of technology vendors. Quilt is a very big participant, in the open caching. So yeah, I highly recommend people visit the microsite to go see everybody who's involved.
Okay, and the status as of today for open caching, it's not a standard, at least yet. It's a specification, as I understand. Is that
correct? We define them as specifications. We are not what's called a standards definitions organization, SDO, like CTA or SCUDY or SMPTE. So what we produce are specifications, and we're doing more than just writing documents. So we have a very big initiative right now to codify those specifications into reference code. So our labs initiative, which has a bunch of people involved, from Broadpeak to Telefonica to Lumen, all sorts of individuals contributing working code to get that set up. So yeah, specifications, but with code. Will it be standardized in the future? That will depend on whether or not another organization, for example, maybe ITF, picks it up as part of the CDNI initiative.
Okay, so let's talk about technology. Eric, so can you tell us a bit what is the core technology of open caching?
So there's two components to it, right? There's obviously a hardware-based approach, and then there's a software-based approach. JT very nicely segued to the software-based component of it by mentioning IETF. A lot of the specifications are built on top of CDNI, CDN interoperability, a framework that IETF had developed years ago. And we've kind of taken that and moved the ball forward and chosen to build a lot on top of those standards. Those are clear specifications and standards that are defined. And what we're doing is we're taking those, identifying gaps from a content provider standpoint, from a content delivery network standpoint, or from a ISP standpoint that we need to complete this ecosystem, and fill them. It's all about that improved interoperability and finding ways to make things simpler. So from a technology standpoint, it's a series of different standard specifications we need supported. From a standard standpoint, there are code standards to follow through the IETF CDNI that are built on top of. But again, our portion of it hasn't yet been pulled into IETF. So you're looking at a little bit of a hybrid there. And that's where the Open Caching website nicely walks through those differences. And then the last thing is ultimately, you're looking at a scenario where the hardware ultimately comes down to the ISP network or the CDN that's participating, but the interoperable APIs and, more importantly, the standard architecture is the same. And that, I think that's the key thing that we've always asked for. When I'll give a brief anecdote. When I joined Disney Streaming prior to when I was at Major League Baseball Advanced Media, I came in and I had to make heads and tails of 4 or 5 different CDN architectures that were all completely different. They all operated in different ways. They all had their pluses and minuses, their quirks. And what that ends up leading to is when you're trying to solve an issue with one or two, you've got to balance between, could it be the architecture? What architecture components may be adding to latency? How am I running into a specific gap within their infrastructure, within this black boxed infrastructure that I don't understand? The whole point of what we're going for with open caching is not to replace those CDNs or get rid of them, but to say, hey, can we all unify around a similar architecture so that it's not a scattered challenged ecosystem where everyone does it differently? And then can we also open up that black box more and communicate more? We have a specification that is moving through the process now on our side around capacity insights, sharing data around how much capacity is available in a specific region for a specific content provider. Not only is that important for scaling purposes, but it's also important for that transparency purpose. We're continuing to try to move the ball forward on transparency, just like others in the industry are too. We have a partnership with CTA Wave on some stuff that we've been working on. And one of the things that group has pushed forward is CMCD and CMSD, content metadata, client data, content client data metadata. I don't know the exact phrasing of it off the top of my head, but there's also client server metadata. And it's basically sharing the data of the connectivity and the tissue of the server side and the content side at the same time, so that all sides have transparency and understanding of what's the performance like, what the server health is like, and what the architecture is, what's occurring within the architecture at the time, so everyone can partake in solving these problems. And it no longer just becomes, I pay you ISP, or rather I pay you CDN, go solve my problem. It's, I'm part of the solution just as much as you are.
If I can add something to that, so just to harp on the interoperable nature of open caching, one of our participants is Varnish Software, right? So Varnish is, one of the leading providers of a reverse proxy for CDNs. Lots of companies use them. Lots of companies use Nginx. Lots of companies use existing software to handle their caching. We want to be able to have those to be sort of plug and play, right? So imagine a CDN that's using, or an operator that's using Varnish could just turn on a configuration setting and it would support all of the APIs for open caching. And so now it can communicate and share data with all the other open caching components in the network. That's what we want to get to, right? We want to make it as easy as possible for companies to support open caching without having to rip out and replace everything.
Okay, so that would be my question to Jim. So if I'm a Velocix customer, do I need to rip out anything, or is it just a configuration slip?
Yeah. So I mean, as Eric and JT mentioned, open caching builds on this heritage of activity and the specifications and standards and so on around CDN interconnection. And so a lot of the base capabilities of the CDNs that have been deployed inside of operator networks are leveraged in implementing some of the open caching. And there are some new, there's obviously new stuff involved in the specifications in trying to make everybody communicate in the same ways, but a lot of the underpinnings are already available inside of these networks. It's a matter of making sure that everybody's communicating using the same APIs and the same language, and as we structure things so that we're speaking the same language about how all of the open caching components work. So it's the great thing is that for an ISP that already has private CDN deployed, they have a lot of the basic building blocks that they need to deploy open caching. Usually, it's just a layer of software that you activate over the top of those caches that allow you to take advantage of the capacity that's already there. And then it allows content providers to take advantage of that deployed capacity. And at the end of the day, what we're here to talk about today is also like the business model, right? And how does all this get facilitated? Because the technology we know works, right? I mean, it's been proven out now that this works and it offers benefits. The real question, I think, on all sides is what does the business relationship look like between the various parties, and how do you get the best benefit for each of those stakeholders?
Jim, you're not taking over moderation here, right? So that's we'll get there, right? So specifications, go to the micro website, go to the SVA website. You find everything you need there. And yeah, let's talk about what is driving open caching. Great technology. But Eric, I mean, you have two hats. What do you see? And I let you choose which one you want to wear now. What do you see as the key business drivers for open caching? Why are people moving?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have some components that make a lot of sense to answer from a content provider standpoint, some selfish reasons there, and then also from a ISP standpoint that make a ton of sense. And I think Jim touched a bit upon the ISP side. There's a lot more need for increased interoperability between all these different locations and these different networks. They all exist. We have to share the data. It just doesn't make sense for the ecosystem of a server to be dropped inside of a network if an ISP already has their own CDN and already has their own infrastructure to do this. Some of them do, some of them don't. But if they already do, why not find a way that we can't all take advantage of it if there's extra capacity and excess capacity? Brief anecdote, I spoke just as part of my technical advocate role to an ISP within the market. And I don't want to go into their name or their detail, but one of the questions that they raised to me that was very fascinating was, hey, we've had to build excess capacity for large scale events that we have on our own network because we have to stream on our own network and reach our own customers. And you're talking about very large scale events that happen once a year. The end result is we have X terabits per second available that we're never using. Mm-hmm. How can we take advantage of it? How can we be part of open caching and take advantage of it? One of the things that we've always said at Disney Streaming is we're happy to pay fair market rates for fair market access for performance. And so it enables them access and opportunity into the marketplace of the way that we currently are participating with CDNs. We consider open caching just another endpoint and just another opportunity for us to reach our customers. It's all about performance at the end of the day for us. And if it can provide better performance, we're game and we're happy to participate. But the key thing that we always keep in mind is we always see a world and an ecosystem. And now I'll put my Disney streaming hat on. There's always a world and an ecosystem for everyone that's already playing out there, right? There's always a world and an ecosystem for CDNs because there's going to be traffic that won't work on ISPs directly. There's going to be networks that aren't going to want to participate. They're going to be comfortable with their CDN ecosystem. There are certainly markets where that makes sense too. Open caching, there are ISPs that we work with throughout the world in different markets that have deployed open caches where we see great performance gains from it. So we're willing to put more traffic on their network in order to support that. We have our own capacity planning rules. We will never violate those, but we are willing to participate more and put more traffic on their network because there's value to what we're returning to our customers in the terms of performance. And then the final thing is, you look at the Netflixes of the world with their boxes deployed everywhere. There's nothing to say that that's not a viable strategy and market in certain markets where it's just not tenable for an ISP to invest the capital to deploy an open cache network that participates or have a CDN participate with them and build inside their open caching inside their network and provide a white labeled version of open caching. So you look at that entire ecosystem and there's a way forward for all three. The biggest thing that we're pushing, and this is something that I'm pushing throughout the industry, is CDN, ISP, your own builds, whatever it is. If you want to participate in the way things are moving in the future, from our standpoint, here's the standards and specifications they built as part of open caching. Whether it be an open cache deployment within an ISP or a deployment of a CDN, the standard way to talk still needs to happen because otherwise we're all going to be at cross channels and crosstalks. And eventually we're not going to be able to evolve forward and really manage all of the traffic that's flowing over the internet for all of our different content as the OTT environment just continues to grow.
Okay. JT, from your perspective, anything to add specifically for the OTT service providers, Netflix's, Disney's, and whatever their name is? What are the key advantages they tell you when you speak to them, or what are the ones you tell them?
Well, I mean, the benefits, and Eric covered a lot of those, right? The benefits are largely that I want to get data from all of my delivery networks and be able to coordinate, where I might want to send traffic, that's most cost effective to me, for example. What network can I use that has extra capacity that they may be willing to sell me for cheaper than what I would normally pay? So, there are drivers from an OTT platform perspective around the cost optics of delivering and having an open caching network or being part of an open caching network where they can tap into capacity information from across all of the participants in the network. That's really valuable. And obviously, performance is key, right? So if an open caching node does not perform as well as a non-open caching node, they're not going to move in that direction, right? And Verizon and Disney have published some data about the production traffic that Verizon's doing, and it is, the performance has been equal to or a little bit better sometimes than a normal cache. So that is also a key consideration. But the benefits that I really hear from the OTT platform operators are, we want centralized control of our entire delivery architecture. And so open caching provides us that opportunity when we can implement a management interface for all of our caches to be able to pull data, log data, see, what's happening, purge data across all of the caches that exist in different delivery networks. It's really about that management efficiency.
Jim, some big telcos are your clients, Vodafone, Liberty, and others. What do you hear from them? I mean, you're having discussions about open caching. So what do they like the most?
Yeah. So obviously I can't talk about specifics of those companies, but in general, the kinds of things that we hear from ISPs are that, they're really interested in this model, right? They're interested in the business model and understanding how they can participate in this rising consumer interest in direct-to-consumer services, right? And so there's a lot of discussion around like what's the commercial benefit from an ISP perspective of activating open caching. And there are some aspects that are with respect to revenue generation, right? I mean, they can take some of their network that is currently unused and generate some additional revenue by establishing some of these commercial relationships with content partners that are interested in getting access to that last mile network, or improving the scale, or from their perspective, possibly reducing the cost of delivery. So there's that piece, and there's also we see advantages for ISPs in another direction as well, which is that sometimes they have limitations in the capacity of their own CDNs, and they may be able to take advantage of open caching capacity at other adjacent operators that have open caching capabilities. So it really is a two-way. It's not just a one-way model where the content providers are leveraging the ISP networks. It could be that ISPs themselves are carrying some of their own traffic over their own network, and they need to flex capacity outside of that. And they have a variety of choices as to how they do that. They can use public CDNs, or they could use open caching resources to go ahead and do that. And so that's really the key driver for ISPs, is they're trying to understand that. What is the business model, right? What's the business case? How does it start out, and how does it grow as it evolves over time as well? Because it's not just like, one particular content provider saying, hey, I'm going to adopt open caching. It's the broader picture of, once these networks get in place and they can communicate with each other, does it open up an economy around open caching where, obviously you want to be part of that economy as it begins to grow. So that's what I think we're seeing from ISPs, is how do I participate in the economy surrounding open caching?
Okay, so they see the value. Do we see them moving? So let's talk about adoption. So where are we? Are we still at the beginning? Are we in the middle? Is it really taking off now? So do we see real engagement and deployments? And if not yet, when do you expect them? I don't know who wants to take it. Maybe JT.
Yeah, I can talk to a little bit of that, right? So, open caching is very interesting right now because we have specs that people can build their own open caching, systems. But then there are also now vendors entering the market like Velocix, and they provide a tremendous amount of value on top of open caching because they can help ISPs get up to speed and implement it very quickly. And they provide, advanced and enhanced functions and features that aren't in the specs. So we're starting to see adoption through those vendors. For example, we had adoptions with British Telecom has put some open caching into their network. We've got Telecom Argentina has done. Viasat early on built their own solution and partnered with Thibeault to use open caching on planes, so that they could deliver a better video experience there. So we're seeing actual, and obviously Verizon has, open caching implemented in their network. It's being used for some, Disney streaming production traffic. So we're seeing implementations. What we're seeing right now are a lot of operators knocking on the door. And you have a lot of operators involved, right? So Telefonica, Orange, Verizon, these are all ISPs that are heavily invested in working with open caching and in the working group and bringing the spec into their network to develop the solution. So I think what we're kind of like what you described, it we're kind of like just starting to ramp up like this. And I think it's all of a sudden it's going to go up like this. It's going to go really fast as we start to see a lot of operators adopt and implement. So, I'd probably say over the next 12 to 18 months, we'll see a lot more implementations.
Okay.
I'll just add to that, actually. It's for me, I've been on the ground floor since the beginning, and it was 1 or 2 participants and 1 or 2 operators. And since then, we've had quite a lot of technical implementers, is what I call kind of the Velocix team. Technical implementers come to us and ask us questions, and that was happening a year and a half ago. Now what I'm seeing is I'm getting a lot of requests knocking on my door just based on my role in the SVA and as this technical advocate from ISPs, just asking the same questions you're asking today. And, I'm fielding a lot of those calls just to further the case in the marketplace that there is a room for open caching, and here's some ways to think about it, and here's some ways to move forward with it.
Hopefully we all watch.
I mean, I'm hoping so, but if not, I'm always happy to take those calls and have those conversations with ISPs as long as they're interested in an actual dialogue around it. And for me, it's a matter of a cause that I kind of believe in. I've been dealing with the pain of managing so many different endpoints over the years, and have grown my team to do so. And the whole point of what we do day in and day out is managing all of these different partners. We need a world where it's simpler. We know we need a world where it's simpler. If anything, the way we all had to scatter and run around to solve bitrate limitations and bandwidth limitations during the starting rise of work from home during COVID gives an example of a way we all need to work better together.
Yeah.
So how can we make that happen? Here's an easy way that everyone can work better together. And to the point we brought up before, there's business in it for everyone.
So what we've been talking about ISPs now. What about the other OTT players? Are they equally interested as Disney obviously is? How do they take the approach? Is it a global approach? Is it region by region? Obviously, only where you launched your program.
I can answer some of that vaguely because I talk to them and I talk to the providers, but I don't necessarily have the ability to share names. There are other content providers pushing bits, whether they be software downloads or other OTT content providers that are pushing bits through these different networks. The way we view it, and towards your regional question, that's all I can answer there is the way we view it, region by region. It's all about where can we see the best value for the amount of work we need to do today. As the specs continue to evolve and develop and eventually become this one-click implementation, deploy, go, we're ready to launch as many places as possible. But until that's there, we do it region by region, network by network, where it returns the most value for us, for our customers from a performance standpoint. And we ensure that we're also meeting and reaching the most eyeballs. So it is still a slower go. It's part of that upward trajectory and upward slope. But certainly the steam is gaining behind it. And we're not the only content providers pushing content this way. And I don't think we'll be the only OTT provider that's out there talking about it at some point.
Okay. So the specs are there, the interest there, the curve is getting there. Let's talk about how does it work, business model. So Jim, what type of business models do you support / suggest? Who typically talks to who pays who? What are the options?
Yeah, so it's interesting because this is like a core discussion for this. I think on one hand, when the open caching specs first came out, I think from a technology provider standpoint, it was always interesting, right? Because we were always looking at new technology and things to implement. And we would go out and we would talk to the ISPs about it. And we would say, hey, are you guys interested in this? And we would highlight open caching. And usually the response was, I don't understand what's in it. What's in it for us from a business perspective, right? But that's beginning to change. That dynamic's beginning to change. And we've seen that really over the past 12 months where as you start to see rising interest from the content provider side, and as we start to see this substantial growth in the amount of traffic on these direct-to-consumer services. And you got to remember that we have, there are folks in the telco space that have these that are affiliated or own content companies as well. And so there's this like different kind of an interest in how do you connect telco and content in these ecosystems. So when we look at this, every operator, depending on physically where they are, how large the operators are, they may look at the business models a little bit differently. And so we've seen really a convergence around a couple of different business models. The first business model is one where let's say we have a large ISP, and that ISP is interested in an open caching, interested in opening their CDN framework to various OTT traffic. In some cases, they're like, hey, we want to carry this traffic, and we just need a technology solution. Like we're gonna either make direct connections with some of the large content streamers, or they would like some facilitation of a connection with a content provider. And that's where Velocix can come in, and we can highlight some of the content partners that we've worked with, and we can make connections for them. And then ultimately we step out of the way and allow them to establish commercial agreements and commercial terms, and we're not involved in those discussions. We just become a facilitator from a technology standpoint of enabling that relationship to turn into a lucrative business relationship on both sides. That's option one, and I think that's appropriate for some of the, again, larger content providers and larger ISPs. And then the other model is something where sometimes we get the question from ISPs where it's like, look, I don't want to deal with 1,000 content providers and have 1,000 different agreements, and vice versa on the content streamer side. The same way. It's like I don't want to deal with a small ISP, a bunch of small ISPs. I just want to deal with one party. And in that kind of circumstance, Velocix becomes more of a middleman, where we actually establish the agreements with the content streamers, and we establish a separate, like a revenue share agreement, but there are a variety of different ways of presenting that kind of a commercial model to an ISP, because we have to cover off some of the costs associated with deploying an open caching framework. The advantage that we have, being an incumbent supplier of private CDN tech, is that many of our pre-existing customers, they have a built-in investment in their private CDNs already, right? So they have a business case, they have a justification for deploying capacity, and oftentimes they have latent capacity within their networks that they could activate and start generating some revenue on today. And so, really depending on who we're talking to, if they have multiple uses for a CDN, we'll come in and we'll build a business case that combines the value proposition for open caching, for pay TV streaming. We talk about 5G, connected car opportunities. All of this kind of stuff comes into play, and you just basically build a nice business case around why you're going to piece this together. And one other point that I think is interesting on open caching, especially as we start to see privacy concerns coming up with respect to advertising, we're starting to see that domestically and internationally, is that there may be a role for ISPs in helping to navigate some of the privacy concerns around some of the ad tech, which I think is an area that's still ahead of us in terms of discussion. But there may be some potential collaboration and revenue opportunities for an ISP with respect to some of the ad monetization as well.
Okay. Eric, the two models that Jim just described, is that something you see, you subscribe to that? Do you think both will coexist in the future, or is there a tendency more to one or the other?
I'm as of now, I'm letting the marketplace play out and following along. We don't have a strong preference to what we participate in. Outside to say we always pay for performance, but we always have clear market rates that we target, and we know what we're willing to pay. And so for us, if something's within range and there's reasonable purpose for why we would go a direction, whether it be strategic or there's value to it a return to our customers, we're always happy to have those conversations, and different models right now are still being explored, so we're open to them. Where things go, though, I have no idea. And I'm not willing to take a bet just yet. I'm waiting to let the market kind of dictate.
Okay. JT, I guess similar words from you?
Yeah, I mean, the SVA is a technical association, so we are hands off on the business models that ISPs, CDNs, and content owners might come to regarding open caching. But I think it's important. There are technical aspects to supporting business relationships and business models, right? So what data does an open caching node need to throw off in order to support, a fragmented billing relationship between, different parties in an open caching network? So the group is looking at, what do we need to do technically to support different business models? But yeah, we have absolutely zero opinion on what business models actually end up shaking out.
Okay. I see some questions coming in already, so please, audience, bring it on. We'll get to all of them in the end, but there's one that just fits perfectly. And that's about, if I'm a Velocix customer today, how do I enable open caching? So what's the process, Jim? So what's needed to do?
Yeah. So, again, as I mentioned earlier in the webcast here, that the base components associated with open caching are part of the Velocix CDN already, right? There's certain things that we have to activate in order to activate open caching on an existing network. But it's software, right? If people already have a CDN in place, they got 95% of what they need in order to activate open caching. And then we add the bits to make it communicate with the other open caching compliant components that are out there. There's always some testing that goes into this to make sure that everything fits and works well. And really the hard part is beyond just setting it up, the setup and all the rest of it is actually the easy bit. It's the commercial aspects of making sure that ultimately, everybody knows what's in it for each stakeholder. And so that's something that we work closely with the various ISPs. Number one, take a look at the kind of traffic that they carry, and look at the content service providers where you could actually make a business out of it, right? By helping out, because if they're only carrying very small amounts of traffic, the business opportunity is probably not that great. But if they have a set of content that they're carrying a lot of, there's discussions that can be had there, and we can build a good business case out of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Eric, for the OTT providers, what do you see the best path for them to enable open caching? Do you suggest or maybe expect pilot programs you mentioned on a regional basis? Is that the way to go? What do they need to do? What's the thinking process that needs to start?
A lot of it comes down to internal tooling. How do you manage multiple networks, multiple endpoints, multiple distribution points, whether it be internal or third-party tooling that you use, ensuring that you can handle things like redirects within your applications, because that is one method and mechanism by which we can we delegate traffic within an open caching ecosystem. It's the one I subscribe to, at least, and that we take advantage of. In addition, one of the things that's a really important thing about is what's your testing criteria? We always get asked from open caching partners, what do we need to set up? And we give them a list. We have a whole document that's our onboarding document, but then also, what are we looking for? How do we grow traffic? How do we take advantage of the network further and further? And the thing we always look towards at the end of the day is performance, but more importantly, it's how are we going to test for that performance? Mm-hmm. So for us, we've developed standards over the years of different ways we test against different types of networks, and we report back on that to our partners. And the goal and the thing is, the goal and within our process is clear: consistent performance, capacity, and then ultimately is the price right. And so understanding where those fit within your desired stack rank ecosystem is how you get to ultimately, from a content provider standpoint at least, figure out which direction within open caching works for you.
Okay. And JT, I assume the SVA makes it easy to deploy. It's part of the spec, so you offer tools, test beds. What do you add to that?
Yeah, so I mean, and that's a great question, right? We did just launch an API testbed. It was last year. We just had a press release announcement that several of our member companies have effectively tested against that API testbed. So we're looking at ways to enable companies that build an open caching solution to be able to make sure that it's compliant with the specifications. That's where the API testbed comes into play. But we're also looking down the road at things that are a bit deeper. So maybe certification programs using third parties to be able to ensure that an open caching deployment not only meets the specifications, but does what it's supposed to do after an API, for example, exchanges data. Making sure that the open caching operator is doing what they're supposed to be doing with the data they've received. So we're looking at more ways to empower operators or content owners who are building and deploying open caching to ensure that it's working as it's intended. So for our member companies, at least right now, the API testbed is the first step to doing that.
Okay. I'm looking at the clock. We're almost at 45 minutes. So the next question is about adoption, and let's keep it short. So let's go around the table. So we're in the hockey stick, still there, going up. So let's say in 2 years from now, where are we in terms of adoption, market adoption? And I let JT go first.
Of course, yeah, you go to be keeping it short. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of positive adoption at that point, right? So we'll have a percentage of operators who have adopted. We'll have a percentage of content rights holders or OTT platform operators who've adopted. We'll have a good percentage of CDNs who've adopted as well. So I think at that time frame we'll be going strongly towards a market saturation for open caching.
Okay, so good percentages above 50%.
Ooh, yeah. I'm not going to stick a percentage number on that. I'm just going to say it's going to be a good percent.
Okay, Eric, what's your prediction?
I'm sticking with JT's no percentage numbers line. I'll say that we see a lot of momentum within the marketplace. One of the aspects that I don't think we covered enough, and JT kind of mentioned it, but I think we'll also see not only some adoption within ISPs, more partnership from a OTT standpoint, but I think we'll also see CDNs have more participation in the interoperability of those networks. They're all crucial to the internet. CDNs are not going anywhere. They're important to how the network is shaped online, but interoperation is key now. And we can see these standards and these specifications are being built with their help. Lumen is a major part of the configuration APIs that we're building and expanding on, and that we've ratified actually. And the capacity insights have been built with a lot of investment from Limelight and participation from Limelight. So you see these different CDNs participating and making involvement a critical part of how they think about interoperability. To me, it's just a sign that this is here to stay, but more importantly, that this is gaining more and more momentum. And a couple of years' time, I think we'll see that interoperability be the standard way an open cache participating OTT provider or software provider can integrate and interact with their CDNs.
Okay. Do I get percentages from you, Jim?
No, you won't get percentages. But I think what you'll see. I mean, if we can draw a trend line with respect to what's happening in the industry, right? I mean, we definitely see content moving back to the content owners and producers and studios and so on. So there are more of those services, more content, more utilization of those services. The quality of the video content is rising, right? So there's going to be a greater need for network. And I think the trend line with respect to the technology side is that we've always talked about this in the CDN industry, which is how do you simplify the connection between the production of the content and the delivery to the end subscriber. And I think that's what we're talking about here, right? And it's making it much easier to connect the dots between the consumer and the producer of that content. So logically it's going to happen. I think the question that we have is, how long is that timetable going to be? And I think some of these early adopter ISPs are the ones that are going to define how quickly, because if they come out and say, hey, this has been great for us, it's been good business, it's been good establishing relationships. And I actually think in this kind of a space, I mentioned the ad tech component, but I think it's the people that take bets and say this is a conversation that needs to be had. We can't see all of the opportunities that potentially will be formed out of these collaborations and relationships today, but I do think that there are a lot of new opportunities for ISPs and for content providers to collaborate together. There are a lot of revenue generating opportunities there, which is the two sides have not really talked that much about those commercial opportunities in the past. Open caching creates that framework above which we can have some of those kinds of discussions.
Great. So, bright future for open caching. We're already over the time, but I think that one question that's interesting, and that is, what is a typical timetable for deploying open caching? And maybe that's again for you, Jim. So, how long do I need? I have an existing Velocix solution. You talked about some of the analysis. How long does it take?
Yeah, well, it's gonna vary. I think the first implementation, right? If you're just gonna launch open caching and you've identified an individual content partner that you want to start with, or a small set of content partners you want to start with, I mean, we're not talking huge amounts of time. If you've already got your CDN deployed, it's a matter of activation. It's a matter of testing and making sure that there's confidence on all sides that the systems are going to work the way that they're expected to. So, I mean, you're looking on the order of maybe a quarter or something like that in order to get something like that deployed. As I said, the business discussions are always unknown, right? How long that kind of stuff is going to take, and so that piece, you get a lawyer involved, it could take it could take a long period of time. But the expectation is that stuff is going to get standardized. So that it won't, that won't be a long pole in the tent. So from that standpoint, I think for an existing somebody that has experience in deploying CDNs, it's a pretty quick effort to get something like that deployed. And then once it's deployed, it's a cookie cutter kind of a process to going ahead and adding additional content providers.
So I'm conscious of time, and I think we need to wrap it up. Eric needs to go to the next call, JT back to his conference. So thank you, gentlemen, very much for being here. It was a great talk, and obviously we could continue the talk for quite a while longer. The ones who sent questions, will try to get back to you via email and answer those. You will receive a link to the recording via email in a few days. And if you have any further questions, please reach out to Jim or myself. You should see a slide with the email addresses, and you'll also find it in the recording. On behalf of all of us, thank you for being with us. It was great to have you. Stay safe, stay healthy. And gentlemen, see you soon in another panel or at a trade show.
Sounds good. Thanks, Andy.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.